So no use beating around the bush with this one because I already showed you what I was working on. This is a Macintosh TV. And we're on my bed because, one, my desk really doesn't have enough room on it at the current moment. I don't want to clean it off at the moment, but we will. You know, I'll take care of that off camera. The other reason is I do want to flip this thing around a couple times, and, you know, the bed is a soft material. It's not going to mess up the thing more than it already is. So, yeah, Macintosh TV. So, I actually have interest in this thing from the Vintage Apple subreddit as well. So, if you're coming here from there, you already know the full story behind this machine as I've gone into it. If you're coming here from anywhere else and you don't know the full story of this machine, well, let's give you a bit of a recap. This machine, I actually found this on a Craigslist curb alert sometime in 2005, 2006. And basically back then, my parents were mostly stay-at-home parents. And during the summer when I was out of school, we'd, get kind of bored, and one of the things we do to entertain ourselves, short of, playing video games all the time in the house, was we'd fire up Craigslist, see what's in the free section, go have some fun. Well, this particular curb alert, it had potential. It didn't really talk about what was there, just various electronics and no pictures, so I didn't even know this was there to begin with. But we showed up, and I saw this thing face down in the dirt, poor thing. And some of the blemishes you see on it are from that. It's kind of unfortunate. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull it a little forward here. But yeah, basically, that's how I found it. And it did still work. I got it home, I fired it up, and it did still work. The only problem is I didn't have a mouse at the time, so I couldn't really do much with it. Yeah, it's kind of tiring. No, I'm kidding. Couldn't do much with it because I didn't have a mouse, and I didn't have install media, and the OS was slower than molasses. So I kind of just shelved it and kind of just let it sit. And it went with me when I moved into my grandfather's house, and it kind of sat there for many, many, many years until not long ago, in about I went up to the attic to get the battery out of it in 2015 or so, just to make sure. But in 2016, we ended up selling the house, and that's how we ended up coming back to it a little bit. I ended up giving it to Ryan because I didn't have any room for it here, and Ryan has a pretty good collection, so I figured he would appreciate it in his collection, because it's a really cool little unique machine from the time, and they only made 10,000 of these, so they're not common at all. I would imagine out of that 10,000, there are plenty that are no longer with us today, so yeah, these things are pretty damn rare, and they're a pretty interesting little machine. So, unfortunately, we had a bit of an accident with it. If you can see here, we have a nice crack in the bezel. That happened because as we were moving it, it unfortunately dropped out of our hands and smacked some tile floor. And shockingly, the thing is still completely functional. I got it to Ryan's, it booted, and then he said it just quit working on him. So what I ended up doing, and this fast forward to yesterday, was pulled the board out. Well, the board was actually already out. He was going to send it to DOS Dude 1 to fix. But I had a sneaking suspicion maybe it was capacitor plague or something thereabouts. So I pulled the board out, doused it in 99% alcohol, and gave it a nice scrubbing with a toothbrush. Plugged it back in, and we kind of just hit a brick wall because it still wouldn't start. Until we figured out that the other end of the IEC lead was not plugged in. We went around, took care of that, and the thing fired right up. Unfortunately, it was slow to come back to life. At first, it would chime, but then the hard drive wouldn't spin up at all. So I pulled out the board, reseated some connectors, pulled out the hard drive, replaced it, and such like that. And it finally started coming to life, but it would give the sad Mac error where you get the musical notes instead of the chime, and it would just show a red screen. So I started to panic a little bit because this meant that we were having some potentially serious issues. So I pulled everything back apart again once more, making sure to reseat the RAM. I took a pencil eraser to the RAM. I scrubbed the RAM slot down with more alcohol and reseated the ROM chips and put it back in, and lo and behold, she now seems to function fully, short of just the blemishes around everything here. So before we fire this up, let's look around back and see what we've got there. So here we see what makes the Macintosh TV as special as it is. We've got video, I believe that is video in, and audio in, and you have a TV tuner. The TV tuner is completely useless in this day and age because analog TV is just not a thing anymore. I suppose if you had a game console that uses like an RF adapter, you could use it here. But for the purposes of this machine and what it was originally intended for, that unfortunately is just pretty useless. This is also one of those machines with double ADB ports, which is quite nice. But we pull off the back here, we get our look at the back. And unfortunately, we got a bit of a little surface rust on here. But as part of the restoration process, we're going to take care of that, hopefully. So let's get the board out. I usually like to grab it by the back of the SCSI connector. And out she comes, and there's our board. Now, thankfully I did get the battery out before it could do any damage, so thankfully that's no longer a thing. I do want to get another battery in here, and I do live next to a Batteries Plus, so it shouldn't be terribly hard to get a new battery for this thing. As for everything else here, we do have capacitors, and there's more under here, I believe. We got some on the tuner. I am going to want to take care of those. I don't know if it's actually capacitor plague that put this machine into a comatose state, or if it's just like the RAM was misseated, or just there was so much grime on the board that it was shorting somewhere. But I do want to take care of those capacitors before they do become a real problem. So they haven't eaten away at anything yet. I don't even notice any garbage around it. I mean, there's dust, but that is just dust. I did also bend that little metal tab back, so now the tuner card just comes right out like that. And we got a giant capacitor and two little ones right under it here. So those need to be dealt with as well. Thankfully, relatively few capacitors on this board to deal with, which makes me happy. And I do have a rework station, so that should be easy to take care of. As for this guy, this is going to be our TV tuner board, and I'm just going to leave this out for right now because this is going to be the first part I'm going to work on. It looks like we have some adjustment pots here. I'm going to have to be careful of those. But really what I'm probably going to do is just take a picture of this and just decap it for right now. Because the tuner board is not integral to the system by far. So, yeah, I'm probably just going to decap it so that the caps do not cause a problem with it. And just leave it at that for right now. It will get done because I'm going to have to place an order on Mauser to get some new caps for this thing. So, it's going to happen at some point. Do not worry. Here we've got the original hard drive. I'm surprised this thing still works after what happened to it. But it works the best out of all the drives I've tried in this thing. And I'm going to have to do... let's see. Trying to see if I have any pliers or something like that. Because these things do not want to come out peacefully. They never do. And I hate it oh so much. These older machines... So I'm going to quickly dispatch this off camera so you guys don't have to watch me struggle. There we go. So I just use the screwdriver to kind of get on this tab here and give it a little pry up for it to break free. What I'm going to do, actually, and I'm going to do that probably right now, is just apply some lithium grease to this so it slides in and out a lot easier. But these drives are standard SCSI, but the problem is they use these stupid little card edge adapters, which, if you don't have these, you're basically screwed. And it really sucks. So thankfully this one is still here, but let's see. Maybe right in there you can see this one has a little bit of green goo on it. I'm going to have to take care of that, probably with some vinegar. I tried scrubbing it down with alcohol, and I'm hoping that neutralized it enough for right now. I'm probably going to have to do something about that sooner rather than later, though. And as you can probably see in here, there's all your connectors that these things interface with. So, right now, I'm going to go ahead and reach around back, grab my lithium grease, and just get a little bit on here. Just make this better for myself. Because these things are just a royal pain in the arse. Just get it on these little rails here. You don't need a whole hell of a lot, just enough. And for these old plastics, this is a good idea. Because it just makes your life so much easier. Because Draga 1 actually had a video on a Power Mac G4 Cube. And just the amount of work he had to do to get that Molex connector off the old hard drive was just insanity. So we don't want to have that happen. I did a similar modification on the Quadra, where I just made sure all this stuff has a thin layer of lithium grease, so if you need to get this stuff back off, it doesn't kill you to do it. Because I can tell you right now, if I try to just do this by itself, just get it in there, it's going to catch super badly, and I have to always go for the pliers or the screwdriver. So, while we're looking at the hardware, let's go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing with the logic board, just put a little thin layer on the sides. As I'm doing this, I'm going to explain though. So, even though the machine runs, I still want to get this thing actually restored to somewhat of its former glory. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to go from multiple points here. So, one thing we've already talked about is getting the capacitors done. That's definitely one thing that needs to be done. I do want to pop this fan out in the back here, which that comes off with the back of the back chassis. So that should be easy enough to get off. We need to re-oil it because it kind of sounds like total garbage. It has this like ticking sound, and I don't care for it all that much. That needs to be done. The chassis needs to be repaired, which I'm not going to get my hopes up too much just yet, because I don't know, obviously I'm not saying it's not going to work out. It's just every time I get my hopes up about something, it tends to blow up in my face. But I am currently talking with someone on Reddit right now to potentially get a new chassis for this thing. And I don't want to go into too much details about it, but if that works out, this thing is just going to get a straight up replacement chassis. Because otherwise the plan, if that for whatever reason doesn't work out, is I was going to either glue the front back together because it looks like a pretty clean break, or I was going to use a soldering iron, not my good one, like a cheap Harbor Freight one, and just melt the plastic, kind of just meld it back together, and then sand it down, and then basically repaint the whole thing matte black to bring it back to its former glory. Because as you've no doubt have probably seen from the video, there's a lot of places where the finish is taking some damage, and it's kind of showing some beige through the plastic. So we're going to go ahead and fix that one way or another, and just make sure that's all done. Let's look at the back. This looks good. So let's go ahead and pop this all back on. There are 2 screws that go here. Unfortunately, I don't know where those went. They were never with the machine. And we've got one missing at the bottom down here. But again, if I do manage to score that Mac, and if the Redditor who I'm talking to is watching this, you know who you are. You have my thanks in advance, because that would be awesome to just see this machine really shine because of that. So I'm hoping it works out. I've got a plan A and a plan B in this case to make this thing at least, you know, work in that case. I mean, it boots. We're going to boot it up in a second here, but let's go ahead and get it back on its feet and boot it right up. Alright, here we go. We're looking at dead on at the front. Now, the screen's probably going to look... It's going to be flickery because my camera can't match the display settings. So I do apologize for the flickering. There's really not much I can do about it, unfortunately. It's also going to get a little bit dicey because I do not have a good surface for the mouse to rest on. So, and I'm probably going to have to just come around back here, make enough room on my desk to actually put the keyboard on it, and just control it from behind the camera. I mean, I guess that works, right? And controlling this is no better than my venerable Apple extended keyboard. This is my favorite Apple keyboard of all time. I know people are very partial to the Apple Extended 2. I like that one as well, but this one's gonna be always my favorite. I just like the Salmon Alps. So we're making room on my desk. Oh hey, that's a floppy disk. I'm going to need that in a sec. So the floppy drive is another item on the list of things that need to be done as well. I totally just remembered because it works, but you kind of have to finagle it a little bit. So let's go ahead and give it the reach around. The Gaussian coil kicked in. I know, true story, when we were first trying to get this thing to work, Ryan jumped back about 10 feet when I turned it on and the degaussing coil kicked in. So, let's hit it. Now, because the pram battery is dead, it's going to be really quiet, so there was a chime. We do have hard drive activity. Then it'll reboot, and then boot into the OS. I don't know why every classic Mac I have does that. My Quadra does it. My 2SI does it. This one does it too. I don't know why. Perhaps someone down in the comments can explain that phenomenon to me. So we're loading into 7.6.1. This is a fresh install that I made. Thankfully, with many thanks to DOSDude1 again for shipping me the PowerBook G3 with the CD burner and a fully licensed copy of Toast, because that's how I'm able to install media for these classic Macs, and how this video is very possible. So, quick trivia. I could very well be wrong on why this happens, but I do believe classic Mac OS versions on the install media, they have a special partition or part of the disk that contains boot drivers for Macs, and most burning software completely ignores that. So if you try to burn it on a modern machine that's not aware of it, you'll probably get a disk that looks like it's bootable, but it's not. I could well be wrong on that, but I've noticed that with my Windows machine. If I try to boot these classic Mac OS images, they just don't work at all. This one, however, does work because it's how I installed this. So let's go ahead and test out that quirky CD caddy drive. Let it actually finish booting. And unfortunately, Look down here, we also have volume controls, which I am going to avail myself of, and brightness controls. Let's go ahead and insert that. There was a little bit of resistance, but then it goes right in. Again, I do apologize again for how janky this setup is, but it's really the only setup I can make work at the moment. I do plan for part 2 to actually have a much better setup for filming this. There, as you can see, there's macOS 7.6.1. And I do have mouse. But yeah, there it is. Nice. So, another classic Mac gotcha here is you do not want to eject the disk, because all that's going to do is have a ghost of the disk be on your desktop. What you have to do is you have to go over to Edit or File, and there should be something called Put Away. That's what you want to do. That'll eject the disk and unmount it from your desktop. So there's that. I'm going to go ahead and do that, because we're going to test this further in a second here. So let's go ahead and put in our floppy, or let's go ahead and just put that in. That one went in without a hitch, so I mean, the floppy drive is really inconsistent. Even though it does work, I'm going to probably refurb it. I actually have a bunch of drives from my my Centrus stack in the garage that I've refurbed already, so what I'm probably going to do is just pull one of those out of storage and just slap it in here, and then refurb the drive that's in here and just add it to my stock. Let's go let this thing boot, or not boot, but recognize disk. For some reason, this thing unfortunately likes to take its sweet time booting, or I keep saying booting when I mean to say reading floppy disks, but there it is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Y again to eject it proper. This was a high density disk. So to test it further, what I ended up doing, and I'm just going to use one disk, is I have Microsoft Office, or Microsoft Excel, on the 720K discs. I did install it, and it does work, but the 720K discs are much faster. So I'm going to Command Y, get my disk back, and it did install successfully. I would start it, but this is actually a pre-licensed copy to the people who previously owned the palette of Mac stuff we got 2 years ago. So I don't want to put their personal information up on YouTube, so I'm not going to start it. So let's test the audio capabilities. Now I have a burned audio CD here, which a lot of older machines have trouble with. So we're going to go ahead and fire that up. I'm going to bring up Apple CD audio player. As you can see, we do have some level of noise here. And we're going to go ahead and just... we can go ahead and just... and it does work great. The speaker is a bit quiet, and it's not just because it's buried in blankets right now. It actually is a fair bit quieter than I remember it being, because I did... True facts, I had a teacher of mine had an LC520 in the classroom when I was in middle school, and she used to actually So I don't know if any of you, when you were in school, you had times where it was just a few minutes, 10 minutes of reading time. Sorry if I sound kind of like losing my train of thought. I kind of am. But it's like a few minutes of, just reading, concentrating on reading. My 6th grade teacher had an LC 520 in the room, and what she would do is put on, like, classical music on her LC 520, and that thing was enough to very much coat the entire room in sound. So, yeah. I'm guessing this might be a side effect of bad capacitors. I know V Westlife had a vintage Mac that suffered from the same issue. So, that's pretty much all I really have to say for part 1. My camcorder is kind of running out of battery right now, so I'm going to wrap this up. But it does work. It does seem to work fine. The original hard drive is working fine. Sadly, one of the drawbacks of this machine is it is capped at 8 megabytes of RAM, so there's really not much I can do about that. But currently on the list is either a chassis replacement or a chassis repair. Spray painted if I do go the repair route. I need to re-oil the fan. I need to do a capacitor replacement, which if anybody's watching this who knows just the capacitors to buy for this thing off the hop, please let me know. I need to decap the tuner card and do that at a later time. Refurb the floppy drive. The CD-ROM drive seems to be perfectly fine, so I'm not going to bother. But just pretty much, this thing just needs a good bit of TLC, and most everything that's wrong with it now is mostly cosmetic. So, not bad, but we are going to do a full restore on this thing. That's the goal, no matter how long it takes. So, I don't know when part 2 will be coming, but that's when we're going to start digging into it. I might do a part 2 where I just clean out the interior and refurb as much as I can with what I have. But we'll see when that goes. If you follow me on, well, not follow me really, but if you browse r/vintage apple, I may well post updates there. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it just yet. But, yeah, pretty much this machine's going to get life breathed back into it, and we're going to make it awesome again. So, let's go ahead and shut it down. Now, you can also shut it down from the Apple menu, but, I'm lazy. We've got a power button on the keyboard that lets us do that. So you can hit Command-R to restart, Command-period to cancel, or just hit Enter to shut down. It'll spit out our disk, and we're done here. So, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.